Georgia has always balanced two realities: busy cities in constant motion and silent stretches of forest and back roads where almost anything can happen unnoticed. But over the last 2 years, that silence has changed. Search teams have entered the woods for hikers who never came back. Triangular lights have been reported over rural counties with no aircraft to match them. Old human remains are being identified with new technology, reopening cases long thought resolved, and unexplained deaths across isolated regions are raising questions authorities still can't answer. Tonight, we're looking at the cases reshaping how Georgia sees its own safety. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see Georgia the same way again. The Chattahoochee missing hiker. Chattahoochee National Forest covers nearly 750,000 acres of steep ridges, old-growth trees, and narrow trails where cell service fades long before sunset. It attracts thousands of hikers each year, most familiar with the area's reputation for sudden weather shifts and disorienting terrain. But in June 2024, a disappearance inside the forest drew a level of attention even seasoned rangers weren't prepared for. The missing hiker was a 29-year-old from Athens who had completed several major trails across the southeast. On June 12th, he set out alone on a well-marked section near Blood Mountain, planning a short day hike before meeting friends for dinner. He checked the weather twice, texted his route to a friend, and parked in a monitored lot. Nothing about his preparation suggested carelessness. At 3:40 p.m., he sent one final text: "Stopping for water. Trails quiet today." No one heard from him again. When he failed to return that evening, rangers initiated a search at first light. Less than a mile from his last confirmed location, they found his backpack leaning neatly against a rock face. Inside were his snacks, portable charger, map, and water filter, all items he would need if he were planning to continue deeper into the woods. His phone was not inside the pack. The area around the backpack was unsettlingly clean. No prints, no broken branches, no slide marks. Even the dirt showed no disturbance beyond the search team's footprints. It looked as if the hiker had placed the bag down intentionally and stepped away without any urgency. But if he had continued the hike, why leave all his essentials behind? Search teams expanded outward, using drones with thermal imaging to scan valleys and wooded depressions. No heat signature resembling a human appeared during the first 48 hours. The drones flew multiple passes, each from a different angle, accounting for shadows and tree canopy thickness. Still nothing. One ranger reported an unusual environmental shift during the search, a sudden drop in wind and a pressure change that made the forest feel unnervingly still. He noted the moment in his log because it lasted nearly a full minute before conditions normalized. He later said the silence was too complete, as if the forest itself had paused. On the third day, investigators found the hiker's phone. It lay face down near a narrow off-trail ravine, roughly half a mile from his backpack. The phone showed no cracks, no water damage, and still held a partial charge. Oddly, its activity log showed a brief attempt to connect to a tower located miles away, a connection that should have been impossible from that position based on terrain and elevation. Even stranger, the phone's final GPS ping placed it temporarily in an area searchers had already covered extensively. Rangers insisted that nothing had been there the previous day. Witnesses later came forward with scattered details. A pair of campers recalled hearing something like 2 quick taps, metal against stone, around dusk on the day the hiker vanished. They assumed it was someone adjusting gear. Another hiker reported seeing a flash of white light between trees, low and moving horizontally, but dismissed it as another group using headlamps. By the end of June, after more than 200 volunteers assisted in the search, the operation was scaled back. The forest had offered nothing. No clothing, no traces of struggle, no sign the hiker ventured off the main trail intentionally. Experienced trackers admitted the situation made little sense. Missing hikers usually leave behind patterns, disturbed soil, snapped branches, gradual clues. This case produced none. To this day, the disappearance remains open, with investigators reviewing new tips when they appear. Locals who hike the area say the section where the backpack was found carries a strange atmosphere now. Not dangerous, but unnervingly quiet, as if the forest hasn't fully released whatever happened there. Because some forests don't lose people, they keep them. The Rabun County Silent Triangles. Rabun County sits in the far northeastern corner of Georgia, where the Blue Ridge Mountains rise suddenly, and cell service disappears without warning. Locals are used to strange weather patterns and heavy mist rolling in at night, but early in 2025, something started appearing in the sky that had nothing to do with fog or storms. It began with quiet reports, 3 lights forming a triangle, drifting silently over tree lines, moving in ways no aircraft should. The first documented sighting came from a couple driving on Highway 441 near Clayton. Around 10:15 p.m., they noticed 3 bright white lights arranged in a perfect triangular shape above the ridgeline. They rolled down the windows expecting to hear rotor noise, but the sky was silent. The lights moved slowly, then abruptly shifted sideways, an impossible motion for any plane or helicopter. Within days, more reports surfaced. A farmer near Tiger said the lights hovered above his field for nearly a minute before ascending straight upward. He described the movement as smooth, like it wasn't fighting gravity at all. When deputies reviewed his phone footage, the lights appeared to hold fixed distances from one another, as if connected to a single structure. A week later, the sightings escalated. Campers at Black Rock Mountain State Park reported seeing the triangular formation rotate without drifting. One witness said it turned as one piece, suggesting a solid craft instead of independent lights. They also mentioned a faint low-frequency hum that lasted only a few seconds, followed by complete silence. Local law enforcement contacted the FAA, which confirmed no authorized flights, no training exercises, and no weather balloons in the region during the sightings. Military representatives offered no additional information, repeating only that nothing of interest was recorded on radar. But a technician who spoke anonymously said radar coverage in mountain valleys is incomplete, and whatever people saw may have been flying low enough to avoid detection entirely. The most compelling recording came from a resident in Lakemont. Her security camera captured 3 lights gliding over her property at 3 a.m., perfectly aligned and moving at an unusually slow speed. At one moment, the lights dimmed simultaneously, then brightened together, as if controlled by a single internal system. Analysts who reviewed the video noted the precise synchronization, stating it didn't match typical drone light patterns. What disturbed them most was the shadow outline. For a split second, the brightness of the lights revealed the faint silhouette of a larger triangular mass behind them. The object appeared black against the night sky, absorbing rather than reflecting light. Other witnesses described strange environmental effects: dogs barking at empty spaces, sudden drops in temperature, brief static interference on radios and phones. One hiker said the woods fell completely silent moments before the lights appeared, a detail echoed in multiple reports. Researchers considered natural explanations, satellites, aircraft reflections, atmospheric distortions, but none aligned with the low-altitude lateral movements or geometric reformation observed across multiple nights. By March 2025, the sightings became so frequent that local residents started gathering along overlooks at night, hoping to catch a glimpse. Some succeeded, others left unsettled, saying the lights seemed to move with intention, almost as if scanning the valley. Then, abruptly, the appearances stopped. No official statement followed. No explanation has been offered. The FAA closed their inquiry without conclusions, citing insufficient evidence. But witnesses insist the silence is misleading. Many believe Rabun County experienced a coordinated pattern, something organized, something controlled, something far beyond experimental aircraft. The recordings remain online. The eyewitness reports continue to grow, and the region's reputation has changed, not for its mountains or lakes, but for what moved above them in the early months of 2025. Because when the sky goes quiet, people start to worry. The 2025 North Georgia Human Remains Identifications. In early 2025, Georgia's forensic system released a series of updates that reshaped dozens of long-dormant investigations across the state. For decades, unidentified human remains discovered in wooded areas, riverbanks, and rural properties sat in evidence rooms waiting for answers that never came. Most of these cases were from the 1980s through the early 2000s, periods marked by limited technology, incomplete databases, and inconsistent communication between counties. But in 2025, advances in forensic genealogy finally pushed several of these cases into the light. The first major breakthrough came from Gilmer County. Remains found in 1997 near a creek bed were finally matched to a woman who had been reported missing in South Carolina. Her family believed she had moved away voluntarily. They never imagined she had crossed state lines and died within weeks of leaving home. Investigators reopened the case and quickly discovered inconsistencies in the original report. Missing notes, unlogged items, and a vehicle sighting never followed up. The identification didn't solve her death, but it exposed flaws that may have buried answers for decades. Soon after, another case emerged from White County. Skeletal remains found in 2003 along a remote ATV trail were identified as a man last seen in Florida. His family had filed a missing person report, but due to jurisdictional errors, his information was never entered into the national system. The revelation prompted a broader audit inside the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, raising concerns about how many other cases slipped through similar cracks. As identifications continued, patterns began to surface. Several victims were discovered far from where they were last seen, suggesting they traveled or were taken across multiple counties. Others appeared to have connections to regions with active drug trade in the 1990s, opening questions about whether their deaths were accidents, targeted violence, or something else entirely. In at least one case, the cause of death listed decades ago no longer aligned with the forensic evidence re-examined in 2025. The emotional impact on families was significant. Some had waited 20 years for confirmation. Others had assumed their missing relatives were alive somewhere, choosing distance over contact. Modern identifications forced families to confront difficult questions. Where had their loved ones been during the gaps? Who saw them last? Why did earlier investigations miss critical steps? And perhaps most painfully, could the truth have been known sooner? For investigators, the influx of new identifications created both momentum and pressure. Every confirmed name immediately reopened a case many departments were not prepared to revisit. Evidence had degraded. Witnesses had moved, forgotten, or died. Records were incomplete. Detectives who inherited these files described them as fractured timelines, stories missing the middle chapters, forcing them to reconstruct events piece by piece. One case from Hall County drew particular attention. Remains identified in 2025 showed signs of healed injuries inconsistent with the official narrative from early reports. The victim may have survived an earlier attack or accident before eventually dying under unexplained circumstances. That discovery raised a chilling possibility. Some victims had long histories of danger before their final disappearance, and those histories were never investigated because their identities were unknown. By mid-2025, forensic labs confirmed that dozens of additional cases were in the pipeline for potential identification. Each sample represented not just a person, but a restarted investigation, and the realization that Georgia's unsolved cases were far more interconnected than previously believed. Genealogical DNA has given these victims their names back, but names bring weight. They demand explanations, they demand accountability, and in many cases, they pull investigators toward questions that were ignored, mishandled, or misunderstood decades ago. The dead have begun returning to Georgia's records, but their stories are not returning quietly, because when names return, the hidden timeline returns with them. The Cobb County unexplained woman case. On a warm October morning in 2024, deputies in Cobb County responded to a call about a woman wandering near a wooded area behind a subdivision. At first glance, she appeared unharmed. No visible injuries, no torn clothing, no signs of exposure. But something was immediately wrong. She looked disoriented, as if waking from a long sleep, and could not explain who she was or how she had arrived there. A neighbor who first approached her said she repeated the same words over and over. Where did the lights go? When deputies asked what she meant, she grew visibly frightened and refused to elaborate. Her speech was slow, fragmented, and at times unrelated to the questions being asked. When officers checked nearby missing person reports, none matched her description. She carried no phone, no ID, and no personal belongings. Medical staff at a local hospital determined she was dehydrated, but otherwise physically stable. Toxicology tests showed no drugs and no unusual substances. There were no signs of assault, restraint, or physical trauma. Her vitals were normal. She simply had no memory of the previous night, of where she lived, or even of her own name. Investigators narrowed the window of her appearance to a 7-hour gap between late evening and early morning. Several residents reported hearing a brief, high-pitched hum during that period, similar to electrical interference. One homeowner claimed her backyard motion camera glitched for several seconds around 2:14 a.m., recording only static. Search teams canvassed the wooded area where the woman was found. The ground showed minimal disturbance, except for a patch of flattened vegetation roughly 8 feet across, an area that did not appear trampled by foot traffic. The indentation was wide, shallow, and circular, as though something had rested there temporarily. As investigators tried to gather context, the woman began recalling fragments of memory, but none that helped identify her. She described seeing a white flash behind the trees, then a shape with no sound, followed by everything going dark. When asked for details, she hesitated, then said the memory felt placed there, as if she were remembering something that didn't entirely belong to her. Authorities attempted to cross-check her fingerprints, but found no match in state or federal systems. When released to a temporary care facility, she recognized certain objects, car keys, street signs, common appliances, but still couldn't remember her identity or any personal details. Doctors considered dissociative amnesia triggered by stress, but there was no evidence to suggest a traumatic event had occurred. 3 days after she was found, something unexpected happened. The woman suddenly identified a location, a small town nearly 90 miles away. Deputies drove her there, hoping it would spark recognition. When they arrived, she began shaking, but insisted she had never lived there. The building she pointed to, a closed hardware store, had been shut down for years. No employees or records connected her to it. Then, as quietly as she appeared, she vanished again. Staff at the care facility reported she slipped out during early morning rounds. Her temporary clothing and shoes were left behind. No security cameras captured her exit, despite showing full visibility at other times. Her bed was undisturbed, suggesting she had left before lying down. To this day, no one has identified her. No new sightings have been confirmed. Investigators still do not know where she came from, what happened during the missing hours, or why she focused on the lights when asked about the night before. The case remains open because nothing about it fits cleanly. No crime, no accident, no past to trace, no future trail to follow. Just a woman who appeared from nowhere, stayed long enough to raise questions, then retreated back into silence. And sometimes the missing come back, but not the same. The rural, no clear cause, deaths. Throughout 2024, multiple rural counties in southern and central Georgia began reporting a series of deaths classified under the same ambiguous phrase, no clear cause. These were not cases involving advanced decomposition or victims with complicated medical histories. These were otherwise healthy adults, found in open areas with circumstances that didn't match natural death, but also didn't match foul play. The pattern grew quietly unnoticed outside local communities until families started comparing notes. The first case came from Tift County. A 38-year-old man was found lying beside a dirt access road leading to a soybean field. His truck was parked a short distance away, engine off, keys inside. There were no injuries, no signs of heat stroke, no struggle. The coroner could not determine a cause of death and noted that the man's posture looked as if he simply sat down and never got up. A few weeks later, in Appling County, a woman in her early 50s was discovered near a tree line behind her home. She had been outside less than an hour. Her gardening tools were neatly arranged beside a bucket. Toxicology came back normal. No heart issues, no environmental factors. The death was marked undetermined, unsettling her family and neighbors, who insisted she had been in good health. By midsummer, at least 4 more counties, Dodge, Lawrence, Wheeler, and Wilkinson, reported nearly identical situations. Different ages, different backgrounds, different locations, but the same outcome. Individuals found collapsed in rural or semi-rural areas, without trauma, without poisoning, without explanation. In 2 cases, emergency responders noted that the ambient temperature around the bodies felt slightly cooler than expected, though no environmental anomaly was recorded. Investigators also noticed strange inconsistencies at several scenes. In one case, a thin layer of disturbed soil surrounded the body, forming a faint circular pattern. In another, nearby vegetation appeared flattened, but analysis showed no signs of wind damage or animal activity. Deputies described the sites as clean, almost unnaturally so, with very little trace evidence of any kind. Reports from locals added a more unsettling dimension. A farmer in Wheeler County claimed he heard a brief, low-frequency hum the night before his neighbor was found dead. A hunter in Lawrence County said he noticed an unusual white glow through a patch of pine trees shortly before dawn, accompanied by silence in the woods. No insects, no wind, nothing. Others mentioned hearing metallic clicking sounds in the distance, though none could identify the source. Officials were cautious with public statements. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation acknowledged the deaths, but emphasized that no link had been confirmed between them. Privately, some investigators admitted they were troubled by the similarities, especially the lack of medical or environmental explanations. One coroner reportedly told a deputy, "Healthy people don't just fall over in the middle of an empty field for no reason." Complicating matters, several autopsy reports contained minor anomalies that didn't fit any standard pathology. Small pinpoint hemorrhages with no external trauma, slight irregularities in oxygen levels, inconsistent core temperature readings. None of these signs pointed to a definitive cause, but together they weakened the theory of natural death. As concerns grew, families pushed for deeper investigation. Many felt authorities were withholding information simply because the cases didn't fit into existing categories. Communities began adapting in their own ways, avoiding nighttime walks, checking on elderly neighbors more frequently, and steering clear of isolated backroads. By the end of 2024, the number of no clear cause deaths had doubled compared to the previous year. The GBI continued to assess each case individually, but no public explanation surfaced. Epidemiologists found no pattern of disease, environmental experts ruled out contamination, and law enforcement found no evidence of a serial offender or organized activity. What remains is a cluster of unexplained losses scattered across rural Georgia, cases with beginnings and endings, but no middle. No struggle, no witness, no warning. Just a growing list of people who left their homes and never returned, found in places that should have offered answers, but instead produced silence. Because when cause disappears, so does certainty. The running car and the vanished driver. Just after sunrise on February 2nd, 2025, deputies in Telfair County responded to a call from a trucker who spotted a sedan pulled onto the shoulder of a rural two-lane road. The car's engine was running, headlights on, and the driver's door stood open. At first, the trucker assumed a medical emergency, but when he approached the vehicle, the scene didn't make sense. The driver was gone, leaving behind a wallet, a phone, and a half-finished bottle of water. The engine was warm, and the interior lights glowed steadily in the quiet morning air. Deputies arrived minutes later and confirmed that nothing suggested a struggle. The seat was adjusted for a tall adult male. The phone on the driver's seat had no damage and still displayed a navigation app paused mid-route. The wallet still contained cash and cards. Even the bottle of water was upright in the cup holder, untouched. Everything hinted at a brief routine stop, except for the missing driver. The car belonged to a 33-year-old man from McRae who had left his house shortly before 5 a.m. to drive to work. He had never deviated from his usual route before. Cell tower data showed he followed the same stretch of highway he traveled daily until the signal dropped near the remote area where the car was found. That drop was normal for the region. What wasn't normal was the final phone activity. A single outgoing attempt to call a number not saved in his contacts. The call lasted 0 seconds. Search teams began canvassing the woods on both sides of the road. The roadside dirt was firm, but investigators found only one set of footprints leading away from the car. Prints that stopped abruptly after about 30 feet. Beyond that point, the soil remained undisturbed. The disappearance point didn't make sense. Even a lost or panicked person would have left trace evidence, especially on the ground softened by overnight moisture. K9 units were deployed, but struggled to maintain a consistent trail. Dogs picked up scent near the vehicle, followed it into the tree line, then lost it entirely. Handlers described the cutoff as sharp, not gradual, as if the scent simply ended rather than dispersed. As the search expanded, deputies interviewed residents within a 5-mile radius. One man said he noticed a strange pulsing glow filtering through his blinds around 5:15 a.m., not bright enough to be headlights, but too rhythmic to be lightning. Another reported hearing a low vibrating hum that woke him briefly before fading out a minute later. Neither witness saw the missing driver. Traffic cameras along the highway provided little clarity. The closest camera, located nearly 2 miles south, recorded the man's car passing normally. The next camera north, however, never captured the vehicle. Investigators initially assumed the camera malfunctioned, but logs showed it working before and after the time window when the car should have appeared. The missing footage raised an uncomfortable question. Did the car stop exactly where it was found by coincidence, or was it prevented from traveling farther? On the second day of the search, a deputy found the driver's phone had logged one final data blip, a brief activation of the microphone as if triggered by a voice command or environmental sound. No recording was saved, and no audio file existed. The phone simply noted the activation, then went silent. Rumors began circulating among locals. Some believed the driver had willingly walked into the woods. Others suspected foul play, though nothing at the scene supported that. A few mentioned older stories, reports from decades past of people disappearing along isolated Georgia highways under similarly abrupt circumstances. By the end of the first week, the official search was scaled back. Volunteers continued looking, but the forest offered nothing. Not clothing, not tracks, not even a dropped item. The case remains open, categorized as a missing adult with unexplained circumstances. What unsettles investigators most is the still-running engine, the sense that whatever happened, happened fast. The driver seems to have stepped out expecting to return within seconds, but he never did, and no one has found anything that explains why. because the road keeps moving, even when the story stops. 6 new cases, each revealing how quickly a familiar place can shift into uncertainty. A hiker vanished without leaving a trail. Silent triangles moved over Rabun County. Decades-old remains gained names again. A woman returned with no memory of where she had been. Rural deaths offered no cause, and a running car waited for a driver who never came back. These stories aren't just events. They're warnings about how thin the line is between routine and disappearance. If you made it this far, thank you. Leave a like, tell us which case stayed with you and where we go next. Some places don't hide their mysteries. They wait.